Hi, I'm James Schillinglaw. I'm here at the Virtuoso Symposium, and we're on Crystal Serenity. And I'm here with a familiar face. We interview him many times, and always at Symposium and always at Travel Week, Matthew Upchurch, who's chairman and CEO of Virtuoso. And we're going to talk to him a little bit about the luxury travel market, about his organization, about what's going on with travel sales today in luxury. And you'll hear about that and more on Insider Travel Report. Matthew, first of all, great to see you as always, right?
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so we're here in really a beautiful ship. I mean, we've been lucky enough to be on this, and you've done a few cruises with the Symposium over the years, right?
Yeah, in fact, it was 20 years ago that we chartered the Crystal Symphony, our first charter for a meeting, and it's just really great to be back on the Serenity, and they've done a really nice job with the way they refurbished this. But I think what's really special is I think they got back like 85% of the crew. So
yeah.
Like somebody that served me the other night with Manfredi, 21 years with Crystal, whatever. So it's great. And here we are docked in Monte Carlo. And
for a change, we've done this before.
Yeah. So it's been really, really fun.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what's going on with Virtuoso. How are Virtuoso's sales so far this year? What is the forecast for the rest of 2025?
Well, we were coming in obviously with incredible sales, incredible growth. We have had some indications of a slowing of growth rates.
Right.
But I think the perspective we have to have is these are still growth rates on top of record sales. Mm-hmm. But I think the thing that's going to be really interesting to watch is what I call the long tail of COVID. That first of all, I think it's amazing with all the volatility. The one thing we haven't seen, we didn't see any cancellations. The summer was already booked out, right? If you think about, and then also, I think what's going to be interesting is with all the volatility in the stock markets and this and that and the other is what's going to happen when people are like, what am I doing? Like, why am I sitting here? And I think that's going to be interesting. We've already seen pockets of it. In fact, in my role as the vice chair of WTTC, in April, we saw, the number one travel story was the drop of travel into the U.S.
Right. And
then yet here in the first 10 days of May, we all of a sudden got like, oh, wait a minute, Germany to the U.S. is up 18%, this, whatever. So it's going to be interesting to see how that volatility and how long it goes and whatever. But I think, the fundamentals of why travel, and particularly luxury or premium travel, because it's less elastic to price, right? 6 generations traveling all at the same time. It's never happened in the history of the planet. Prioritization of experiences over goods, which is why you're seeing so many luxury companies, whatever, getting into travel. And then the rise of wealth overall around the world, in the U.S. and the rest of the world.
Well, because of that, the recent decisions by the Trump administration threatening tariffs, imposing tariffs, affecting the stock market. It used to be stock market was a good barometer, and you might see decreases even in luxury travel when people's portfolios went away, right? It really decreased in value, right?
Well, absolutely. The number one correlation to luxury travel was always the stock market, not the general economy.
I think we're past that because it's like all the rules were broken during COVID when people then came back really stronger than almost anybody thought. And now here we are with this, and people are saying, you know what, maybe I'm still going to travel.
Well, we're about to find out. I think what's interesting is when it goes up 1,100 points one day, and then it goes down 900 points the next day, and then it goes up 1,800 points the next day. That volatility, I think, I don't know. I mean, one of the things I said, you heard me say, is it's that what's interesting is like, it feels like for the last 20 some odd years or more that disruptions and volatility have actually made travel more valuable. There's a bit of a carpe diem, like seize the day, life is short.
Certainly COVID contributed to that, and now we have this situation, and it doesn't seem to, people are going to say, heck, I'm going to travel.
Yeah. And also I think there's one of our members on here is doing her thesis, University of Pennsylvania, on how travel affects the worldview and relationship with teenagers. So she both interviewed like current teenagers and people that travel while they're teenagers, and she's getting some amazing data back about like, this is, when we were on trips is when we all sat down and had dinner together and how it affected them and whatever. So I think there's an awareness of, we've been saying this for years, right? We said, the World War II generation, when you and I have been doing this for a long time, and it used to be, travel was a luxury. Right. And I think this whole idea of it's kind of a birthright, whatever. But I think there's a even deeper understanding of the value of travel beyond, just relaxation and all that I think is pretty well embedded.
No, I would agree, and so I wouldn't have said that 10 years ago when we used to do. We've done these things that long. Now, what about Virtuoso itself, as an organization, its membership? I think you've said this before in recent years that you're a different kind of organization now. You're almost 50% international members now, right?
Well, actually, 60% of our members, nearly just short of 60%, are non-U.S. 47% of our advisors are non-U.S. But still, from a production perspective, it's still like 70 some odd percent. Now, a couple of things. Number one, we have much better data in the U.S. I mean, we're dealing with it. We're gaining a lot of data, but as we deal with privacy laws and all that type of stuff around the world, we're getting better data. So, one of our luxury chains when we were in in Lucerne showed that we were 60-40 with them. So 60 U.S., 40 non-U.S. Okay. But I tell you what, I definitely, 1997, we started going to Latin America, then Australia and whatever. And I think when you're in luxury particularly, being global is a key differentiator. I mean, if you think about luxury brands, I mean, when you're going up after that top percentage. But I think what's really cool is not only from the perspective of being relevant in luxury, but also one of the things that going global has done is it's actually helped us be a better U.S. company too, from the perspective that the way in which we're able to serve the very different needs of different members around the world has actually allowed us to reconfigure the way that we serve our own members in the U.S. who are very different business models, different target markets, they go after different age groups or passion points or whatever. And at the end of the day, the thing I'm the most proud of what this organization has done in the last particularly 24 years is that we really help elevate the profession. And I remember being asked at ILTM in 2007, how are you going to find the luxury traveler of the future? And I said, by developing the luxury advisor of the future. Yeah. So when you have an insanely successful millennial advisor, guess what? We got millennial clients.
Absolutely, and you have even younger ones now too. But part of this is in the way Virtuoso has changed. You've also had to restructure the way your staff and your team. The last few weeks I've seen you hire more people in more different positions, and it's just been amazing because you're expanding and you're also changing the way you serve the membership and your preferred suppliers, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of those announcements were promotions, and some were new hires, some were promotions. But yeah, we've been on a very deliberate path of how do we reconfigure the way the organization is set up so that we basically have people that wake up every day. So like, for example, general managers of regions, right? They get up every day. How do we configure and use the assets of Virtuoso to be the best solution for a particular outbound market, right? But that's also helping us configure around not only a geographic, but around cruising, adventure travel, family travel, things like that. And
all those communities we talk about every year, right?
Which we've now had for forever. And it's funny because, I mean, it sounds like it's old hat, but it's the level of things that we're able to do around those thematics that and how all the data works together and how we market differently and how we embed marketing, so it's...
No, it definitely, it's I can see what's going on, and we'll obviously revisit it in August when we have Virtuoso Week. But something you alluded to just now, who is the Virtuoso travel advisor today, and who do you think that advisor is going to be in the future?
What's amazing is, I mean, here we were thinking about a profession that, not that long ago, it's like, oh my God, it's going to whittle away. And now it's like, there are so many travel advisors, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the profession that, in my talks around the world, in December, there was a LinkedIn survey, and the 5th most searched profession and whatever was travel advisor. Yeah. After there were 2 AI ones.
Those are fairly new,
Physical therapist, right? Something around workforce, et cetera, and then travel advisor. So we are tackling the thing about what does it mean to be a Virtuoso travel advisor? Should every advisor at a Virtuoso member agency be called Virtuoso? If not, how do you do it? Under what circumstances? What's the standard? But it's an interesting and very complex issue, because you could be an expert in one thing and know nothing about the other, and there's a difference between an advisor that's only at X amount of sales after 18 months or 2 years versus somebody who's hasn't gotten past a certain number of sales after 10 years. And then the other thing that I'm very passionate about is one of my latest things I've been saying is like, travel advisors don't retire. They just start getting.
I don't think any of us in travel really retire.
No. But what they do is they start getting rid of clients, and here you have an advisor who's now 90 something. They don't retire, but they just progressively get rid of the next most annoying client.
which
they may end up with like 10. I might be 95 and I've got 10 clients, but they're my favorite clients and whatever, blah blah blah. It's
but they can afford to do so because they're so well known.
Well, because they're well known and whatever, and they're but they still love it. I remember Mona Sanders, who we lost this year, and her daughter Anne's really, really sweet. But it was Mona who said, she goes, I remember when I saw her about 10 years ago, and she said, and she was in her 80s, and she goes, talking, and she goes, I bet you wonder why I haven't retired. I said, no, Mona, I wasn't thinking about it. Well, everybody asked me that. She goes, you know what? I tell them, I retired when I became a travel advisor, because my definition of retirement is when you no longer do what you don't want to do.
The old adage, if you love what you do, you never work another day in your life. And people do love this profession, and they're part of it. It's a part of a family in a way. It's part of, everybody knows everybody, and it's. I found it to be, incredibly rewarding career, even as a travel journalist. So I think for a travel advisor, it's actually an amazing profession now.
Yeah, and I think, and there's a lot of really cool things going on with regards to how to work differently, how to pair up. I think one of the biggest things now is this whole idea of unique abilities, where somebody that's really great at the customer interactions and all that pairs up with somebody that's really good at the details. I've always laughed, man, I could sell anybody to go anywhere in the world, but God help them if I booked it.
Well, we've long known that about you, Matthew.
That's like, but the idea of pairing up.
You're the idea generator, and you let the other.
Yeah, so the idea of pairing up with unique ability, people is one that I think is really powerful going forward.
Now, so within that vein, what is a consortium today? I didn't even call it. It's not a name you like that to talk about that much, but the role of a consortium in the travel industry today. What is that role, and how is it changing, and how is Virtuoso changing?
Yeah. As you heard me say, I never I never liked that term in general. I thought it homogenized everything. And then the nature of business and competition, is such that things are invented and then they get copied and then they get commoditized, and there's a new baseline. But for me, the reason I fell in love with the original Allied members and the Allied organization back when I was 24 is that my favorite definition of leadership is the ability to get people to put aside some small amount or a reasonable amount of self-interest to do something together that we couldn't do alone. So for me, I think the main difference now, at least for the way I think about it and the way I see Virtuoso thinking about it, is that once upon a time, in the early days, we were a platform, and our members and partners were businesses. Today, everybody, an individual can be a platform, quote unquote, the technologies, the tool sets, whatever. So I think now it's more about our ability to create a layer down that basically creates a set of capabilities, a brand, a this, or that enable in a much more talent combined with technology way of helping our members and our partners add more value to the unique way in which they add value.
Right.
And I think that's the more, and it's becoming more, fragmented is actually the wrong word, because it sounds fragmented, makes it sound like it's the same amount just broken into smaller pieces. It's really about the ability to be larger and smaller at the same time. And the specificity, the way in which an advisor deals with a client is very specific to the mediums of that client, of their ages, of the way they speak. And I think that's one of the reasons why the advisory business has competed so well with quote unquote direct booking, because the diversity of our advisors matches the insane diversity of the luxury traveler today, which I think is the other thing that's very different. 10, 20, 30 years ago, the luxury traveler today is just really, really diverse.
Really, and of course now we have new technologies. We've been talking a lot about AI here, which is supposed to, a tool actually I think that advisors can use and are still trying to grapple with about how to use it exactly more effectively. But things like that are going to make some of these other tasks that you had much more efficient, and you're going to be able to sell even more. But my final question really for you is about luxury travel. Is it changing? We've been talking about what is luxury travel forever. Is the luxury traveler changing? Is luxury travel experience changing? I heard a few remarks from you that indicated that you think things are in flux right now, and it's a different kind of luxury that we're talking about.
I think, first of all, the answer is absolutely. So we had Anant Sharma here from, talking about what's happening with the. It wasn't one of the speakers that you. One of our speakers, but actually. I did a talk for Walpole, which is the British Luxury Association, a couple of years ago, and I said, we might need to start reconsidering talking about the word luxury and saying it's really the how did you make me feel business. Mm-hmm. And I have this just general concept that it's like in a world where you have the pressures of commoditization, technology that gets better, et cetera, the one thing that will maintain a margin is how did you make me feel. So this is why I'm so excited, for example, to have Will Gadara coming as our keynote speaker at VTW. Mm-hmm. I do my monthly, podcast / videocast thing, and he was my last guest, and I got massive amounts of emails. And he literally said something in that podcast. He said, I deal with a lot of companies outside of hospitality, restaurant, or whatever, and the most important sustainable competitive advantage is going to be hospitality. So it's kind of wild to think, hospitality at a car dealer or a law firm or a whatever, but hospitality being really the ability, how do I interact with people? How do I make them feel? Jill Schiffelbein, who, we do a lot of work with, in some of her speeches, she goes, you could almost define luxury as being seen. Mm-hmm. Like she talks about being a solo female traveler. She goes, being seen, to give you a really simple example, is when I check into a hotel and I got a nice bottle of wine and there's one glass, not two.
They know when she's coming.
It sounds so simple, but it's like, then I feel seen. My whole thing is our greater purpose is enriching lives through human connection. And so it's kind of cool to see how this whole idea of human connection that we were talking about 30 years ago, and now it seems to be popping up everywhere. But it's cool to see how well that concept has become as a tool to create the most defensive business models out there.
Well, you've been talking about these things for years, and a lot of them now are coming full fore, and now you're here dealing with them, and it's amazing, that we're still talking about these things, and still talking about things about the economy and luxury and who is a travel advisor and what is a travel agency today. But it does seem, as you've said before, that this is kind of still remains the golden age of the travel advisor.
Absolutely, there's no question. I mean, look at it. I mean, it's breaking all records. I mean, 10 years ago, it took somebody, 5-10 years to go from zero to a multi-million-dollar producer. Now they can they do it in 18 months.
Absolutely. Well, Matthew, I want to thank you, first of all, for inviting me again to this wonderful symposium. We're here sitting in Monte Carlo, and life is good. Why not? And I'm looking forward to seeing you again in Vegas, as always. And again, thank you for spending some time with us.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
I'm James Shillinglaw, and this is Insider Travel Report.